For the Record is a derivative, non-canonical, fan-made project derived from the Magnus Archives, an original horror podcast which is created and distributed by Rusty Quill Limited. For the Record is not endorsed by Rusty Quill Limited and is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike 4.0 international license. For more information about the original source material, visit www.rustyquill.com/The Magnus Archives. For the Record, Episode 9, Lost to History. Stephen Mullen's audio diary, entry 6, July 9th, 2016. Got another response to my ad today. A woman called Catherine Sinclair sent this in. Local, from Edinburgh. Well, here we go, I suppose. Have you ever heard the story of the Lost Piper? Well, actually, no, I should give some context first. Great. In media res supernatural encounter, just what I asked for. It was a couple of weeks ago, and I was walking down the Royal Mile shortly after midnight. Not for any of the exciting reasons you might usually expect someone to be strolling along a high street in the wee hours. Just got a bit too caught up in catching up with a friend who lives in the town centre. It was nice. I don't know why I'm telling you this, but my own brain hasn't been the kindest to me over the last several months, and it's not as often as I like that I feel up to that sort of quality time. So anyway, there I am, on the mile, and I'm sure you know it's never really empty, but it does get quiet at that time of night. Quiet enough that the small handful of people in your line of sight can turn off into a side street, and for a few moments you can be alone with the dark and the stillness. I hate those moments. They always make me think of the Lost Piper. It's a pretty popular local legend, but I know not everyone's heard it, so I might as well go over it here. The story goes that several centuries ago, no one ever seems to know quite how many, the opening to a network of tunnels is discovered under the Royal Mile. The legend is that some long-gone royals had a secret escape route running between the castle at the top of the mile and Holyrood Palace at its foot. So the group who rediscover this tunnel entrance naturally want to explore the myth, but without risking anyone important. So they fetch a young man. A boy, really. One who plays the bagpipes so they can follow the sound on the surface as he follows the tunnels below. Contrary to what decades of stand-up comedians have had to say, I don't know if the sound of bagpipes could really carry through several feet of rock, but it makes a good story. Anyway, this group are apparently following the pipes well enough until about halfway down the street. I've always pictured them outside the Kirk, where the bridges are now. Anyway, the piping stops, so of course they stop as well and listen. Nothing. They call out the boy's name. Nothing. They wait days for him to come out. Nothing. And of course, the legends go that ever since, if you're out on the mile on a quiet night, you might just hear ghostly piping on the wind. The bit that always gets me is the ring of truth it has. There is so much under that part of the city. There's the famous ones, Mary King's Close, the whole street that survived plague and fire and the march of centuries. built over and left as bare stone. The South Bridge vaults, storage cellars and retail space, abandoned to the impoverished and the desperate when the businesses failed, out of sight and away from the compassion of their former peers. Aside from those, though, because of how steep that part of the city is, perfectly respectable buildings like the Supreme Court can go down for stories of dingy basements and tragic histories to another ground floor. It doesn't seem unlikely for one more poor kid to lie forgotten under our feet. I'm sorry, I'm not sure why I launched off into the history lesson there. I was actually just coming up to the bridges when the last couple of people I could see rounded the corner. I'm not too proud to admit I heard my step a little at that point. It's not that I'm scared of the dark. There were plenty of streetlights anyway. It's just cities on a quiet night that unsettle me. Everything was designed to accommodate throngs of people. The space, the lights along the whole street, the traffic lights without traffic, the endless doors and alleyways for someone to enter or exit. I suppose I feel singled out by having 1,000 people's worth of infrastructure to myself. It's not usually too bad though, a mild spike in anxiety until I can get home. This time, a cool breeze picked up and carried away all the sounds of the city. The traffic from the more modern, car-friendly streets nearby, the distant chatter and laughter of the clubbing scene one street over in the Cowgates, even the near subliminal hum of the lights, all whisked away with the wind. I broke into a run, and the sound of my shoes on stone barely peeked above the edges of the new quiet. I stopped as I got to the crossroads to look down first North Bridge, then South. There should have been people there, a car stopped at lights, an almost empty night bus, anything. But no, just me and the breeze, which, now that I stopped, took on an almost musical tone as it whistled through the uncaring edifice of the city. I knew as soon as I heard it, but it took me a few more moments to admit to myself where that song must be blowing in from. As soon as I did, I was struck with, this sounds silly, but I was struck with the overwhelming impression that in the heartbreak beats between my losing sight of the other pedestrians and this thought forming, a whole new city sprung up above my head. I was left alone with those forgotten by the cold and cruel times gone by that we are supposed to be so much better than. I actually saw colourful shop signs fade and the glass-fronted buildings blur into bare, rough stone, just like Mary King's Close. I was convinced that was it for me, that I'd never rejoin reality again, that the world would go on with no more use for me than a story to send a fun shiver down the children's spines. Just me, the piper's song, and a soft buzz. I remembered I still had my phone on me. Pulled it out, and sure enough there was a new text from the friend I'd spent the evening with. All it said was, "Let me know when you get home safe, okay?" But I couldn't tear my eyes away from it. It seemed the most novel, the most unlikely idea in the world that someone might have thought to check on me. I stared at that screen as though the message might fade into imagination and dreams if I stopped confirming its existence. Oh, my attention was only brought elsewhere by the rather unsteady but very happy seeming woman who stumbled into me from behind. She held onto my shoulders to steady herself as she apologised, and it felt for a second as if all the energies of life were flowing out through her fingertips into me. By the time her friends called her away to the now approaching taxi a few seconds later, my time as Edinburgh's newest ghost story was well and truly over. I hurried home and, if I'm being honest, I'm still a bit more reluctant to stay out late. At least, not alone. Well, what does she want me to do about it? There's not much in the way of souvenirs or eyewitnesses in that story, and I can barely afford to get into the castle. Let alone dig up the high street for secret passageways. Oh well, Fingers crossed the next one gives me something a little more concrete. I'm still not sure I'm supposed to end an audio diary entry. Is it this button? This episode of For the Record was written by and starred Tom Chaney, was directed by Sivan Raz, and was edited by Megan Ryan Lee, Sivan Raz, Joe Mendacium, and Algie Todd. It used sound effects from Free Sound under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial License. For full accreditation, see the show notes. To be kept up to date on new episodes, submit your statements, or to get involved in production, you can follow us on Twitter at FTRecordPod, on Tumblr at ForTheRecordPod, or view our website at fortherecordpodcast.co.uk. Stay safe, take care, and remember who history forgets.